Welcome to the Down in Front Podcast, the official podcast of downinfrontpodcast.com. If this is your first episode joining in, we want to say thank you so much for joining. Thanks so much for tuning in. We always appreciate it. What we usually do here at the Down in Front Podcast is that we review movies, TV shows, just about everything that happens around on the internet, all while having ourselves one of our favorite beverages, which is beverage in French. I know that because I speak French. And tonight, what we're going to be doing is reviewing one of the latest sci-fi movies called Captive State. Super excited to get some actual opinions on this, but before we get into the reviews and all that sorts of stuff, we always like to have a round table to figure out what else we've been watching. So I'm going to toss it over to my best friend. We go way back. I'm super excited. We have a date set up just for us, me and him, this Saturday, and I can't be any more excited. Mr. Brylan, Mouth of the South. What's going on, man? What you sipping on, and what else have you been watching?
Hey, how's it going? Yeah, I am super excited for us as well this Saturday. It'll be a fantastic date. What I'm sipping on right now, I still have some Stacy's mom left over, so I'm just drinking that.
Nice.
She's got it going on.
Nice.
So, really good. But what I've been watching recently, I've been definitely watching a lot of the new Netflix stuff that's been coming out. So one is the new original Netflix movie, Triple Frontier, that stars everybody and their mother, too. It's crazy. It's got Ben Affleck, Oscar Isaac, Garrett Hedlund, Pedro Pascal. It's even got Charlie Hunnam in there for the Wicked Good Gaming guys. So, but this is an interesting movie. It's actually very well produced. It feels just as good as a lot of action films that have been out recently. The set pieces are done really well. It's just something about, like, they have a lot of, like, serious social commentary, especially with military service going back to civilian life, that they kind of just falter on and they just gloss over, which I think they could have actually been able to handle that very well. I think a TV show like The Punisher handles that type of thing much better than this. And the movie is kind of just very predictable where it comes out. So it's solid, but I wouldn't say it's an amazing movie. And then the other series I've started watching is Love, Death, and Robots, which is the animated anthology series that started on Netflix. That is a cyberpunk-themed anthology series throughout, kind of like the Animatrix, just going over different types of ways you can tell cyberpunk stories. And I'm about 6-7 episodes in, and it is amazing. Cool. Like, even in the first episode, I did not know it was CG until they showed the characters' faces. I thought it was live action. It's done so freaking well. Which doesn't surprise me that it's Blur Studios that did that first episode. And if you don't know who they are, they're the studio that makes all the cinematics for Blizzard for any of their Warcraft games, StarCraft, things like that. So they're definitely a very talented bunch of people. It's also produced by Tim Miller and Tim Miller and David Fincher. So
nice.
It definitely has a great pedigree going in. Also, one thing I would say is, like, even though it's like 16 episodes long, each episode is only 11 to 15 minutes. So it's definitely very digestible and bingeable as well. Definitely check it out. It's one of the best things I've seen this year.
Good stuff. Yeah, I mean, both of those seems like some pretty heavy hitters, and especially because everybody has a chance to watch them now. So, good stuff. I'm excited to kind of get your approach, especially for talking to sci-fi on our movie tonight. So thanks for joining in.
No problem.
I'm going to toss it over to one of my favorite people. We have missed him dearly. We were crushed when he couldn't come on so many episodes, but mainly that Captain Marvel episode. So I'm very excited, not so much to have him on this particular review, but excited to see his face. Mr. Mocha, how's it going, man? What you sipping on tonight? Where have you been traveling? And what else have you been watching?
Hey, everybody. So happy to be back in New York. Even happier to be back on the podcast with these fine gentlemen. Warren, you may have been crushed, but I don't think anybody else was more heartbroken than I was when I had to miss the Captain Marvel movie, because obviously I'm the resident Marvel scholar for Down in Front podcast, but also this movie was one that I've been pumped for years, so it really sucked that I couldn't be on. But I'm here trying to do my best I can with tonight's awesome movie. As for what I've been up to, I have been away traveling for work. I just got done doing a cross-country road trip, or at least a segment of it. I spent almost 4 weeks traveling by coach bus from DC all the way to Austin, Texas for South by, which was pretty sick. I just got back from there the other day. And as for what I'm drinking, I'm actually drinking the exact same Buffalo Trace bourbon that I had the last time I was here back in January, because I've literally only been in my apartment for 2 weeks since December of 2018. So I've still got some of this bourbon here.
Good.
It's a nice little welcome home greeting, since I don't have any pets or loved ones, and my plant was nearly dead when I got back. So I revived it. A lot of it was necrotic, but I brought most of it back. Anyway, pumped to be here, guys. I'm very excited to talk about this movie tonight, even if not everyone in the group is as excited as I am.
I feel like that's a shot at me, but did you talk about what you've been watching?
I didn't. I suppose I should. It was really hard for me to actually watch anything these past couple of weeks because I was working every single day. However, I did manage to squeeze in The Promised Land is an anime about an orphanage of children, and that's all I can really say about it. This is one of the cooler animes that I've seen in a while. It's super intense, and I feel like nobody who's seen it or read it should talk to anybody who hasn't about its plot until they've read the first chapter or first episode. I definitely encourage anyone who's even remotely intrigued by my description to just go watch the first episode on Crunchyroll, torrent it, whatever you gotta do, and then have a healthy dialogue about it, because it is a cool show with a cool premise.
Yeah, when I saw that you watched The Promised Neverland, I was like, oh, he's going to talk about that Michael Jackson documentary that came out.
There's a lot of jokes that's in that line. I'm not going to touch that at all. I think right now that episode number 1, I think it should be free on Crunchyroll. So definitely go check that out. I would tell everybody to go read the episode first. So if you go to viz.com, that should be available also. Go read that chapter, and then go watch it in the anime, and then let us know how you feel, because I started it and I was like, why is everybody talking about this on the internet? And I was going through and just kind of flipping, and I was reading it, and I was like, oh, what? And that's how it started. So I'm excited for you to kind of continue. I'm excited to also continue because I haven't finished yet. So Promised Neverland sounds pretty cool. So good stuff. My name is Warren. I will be your host this evening. Sadly, I am not feeling well and have not been feeling well for the past almost a month. So I've not been drinking or eating a bunch of other stuff here. So I'm just sipping on some vitamin water. Really, hopefully that I feel better sometime soon. But I finally, although Emma fell asleep, but whatever, I finally got a chance to watch this movie called Border. Have you guys seen this movie yet?
I've heard of the name. I'm not quite sure what it's about, though.
Okay, you probably heard of the name because this was the only movie in the last maybe 3-4 years that I've actually sat and watched the trailer. And I was blown away by the actual trailer itself. And so we watched this. It was on Xfinity, and we kind of rented it, and we actually kind of watched this movie. And the only thing that I would say about this movie is it follows a Border Patrol sort of worker. Her name's Tina, who has a sense and a really great gift to be able to kind of smell different things during that actual job. And during that particular time when she actually meets somebody that kind of sort of looks like her, it really kind of opens up her world to figure out exactly who she is and try to find her identity. And I'm not sure how I feel about this movie. This movie is very out there. I mean, if this is Fear Boner's material plastered all over it, but it's not a horror movie, it's very entertaining. The makeup was absolutely phenomenal. I'm surprised that they didn't win an Oscar, because the makeup in this movie was absolutely crazy. I think Vice won or something like that, which doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But whatever. Definitely go check out Border. I would love to have a conversation about this movie. Now, it is subtitled and is based out of Sweden, so if you don't like subtitles, sorry. But I really hope that more people has the ability to watch this movie. I think it was racking like a 98 on Rotten Tomatoes for like a long time. I don't know if I can rate it that high. It was a movie that I was never been as intrigued to finish since it started, and it was great. So definitely go check out Border. You can definitely kind of rent it. We saw it on Amazon that you can rent it on it too, but we rented it through Xfinity. So that's what I've been watching. So, as always, we're going to send a couple of sips and send our shout-outs to people or things or entities that we want to say thank you for being you. So I'm going to go raise my drink here and say, Brylan, who are you sending your sip to tonight?
I am going to send my sip to the guys of the Wicked Good Gaming podcast, Chris P, Tall Lanky, Butthole Stanky, Dom, and Dr. Bob. They are really good people, but also they are going to be hosting a after PAX party on Thursday 28th at 7 p.m. at the Good Life, so I think that's going to be awesome, and they're always excited about PAX, as am I, so I'll be out there, I'll be hanging with them, and they just make good work, and it's also really cool to see what they're doing. So here's a sip to those guys.
I guess those dudes are all right. Mocha, who are you sending your sip to tonight?
Yeah, I'm going to be sending my sip a little bit out west to the city of Austin. This was not my first time going to Austin for South by. It was my first time working it, which was an interesting experience. But the city itself is always dope. Whether I'm there for South by when it's flooded with tourists and visitors, or when I'm there like during any other month in the year where it's still filled with people that aren't from Texas, because it's such an attractive spot these days. The city has such a cool vibe, and the people there are awesome. I've never once had a time in that city that wasn't just completely chill and really fun, and I love visiting there. And if it wasn't for the fact that it was in Texas, I'd probably move there myself. So I'm going to raise my glass and send a sip to Austin.
Nice. Thank you, city of Austin. I'm going to be trying to send a couple sips to a lot of different people and personnel who usually doesn't give a lot of shout-outs. Last week, last review, I ended up sending it to Lashana, who actually played a character in Captain Marvel. This week, I'm actually going to give it to the cinematographer of this film, Captive State. His name is Alex Deisenhoff. I took a look at their work and didn't seem like I've actually recognized anything, but coming up for this movie, some of the actual sort of shots were absolutely stunning. And I really enjoyed some of the set pieces and shots that were just set up, especially because I spend a lot of time in Chicago. And I'm like, oh, I've actually seen that. Oh, I've seen that. And I've been walking around all weekend. He's like, oh, cool. They actually did kind of recreate it as much as possible with a lot of these building and structures. So I want to say kind of big shout out to you for the work that you've done on this film. And with that, we're going to get into our spoiler section. So if you have not seen Captive State for right now, you may want to end up pausing the actual recording, pick up a little bit later on. We'll make sure we put the timestamp in our actual sort of episode details. So we are going to take a quick break, and we'll see you soon for a full spoiler edition of Captive State. And we are back, and we are the Down in Front podcast. My name is Warren. I have the luscious Mocha and the beautiful Brylan. Tonight, we're in our spoiler section for Captive State. So, if you have not seen Captive State for right now, it's one of the newest sci-fi films in theaters. Definitely go check it out. I mean, there's not too much in theaters right now that's new besides Captain Marvel's, and so I would tell you to go watch Captain Marvel, but if you want to watch something new, an original story, maybe check out Captive State. What we're going to end up doing is going to tossing it over to a couple different sort of sections. So as we usually do, we're going to break it up into the acting and the characters, and then we're going to talk about the story and plot before we give our conclusion. So what I'm going to do is read the IMDb sort of graphic before we toss it over to Brylan. Captive State. Set in Chicago neighborhood nearly a decade after an occupation by an extraterrestrial force, Captive State explores the lives of both sides of conflict, the collaborators and the descendants. So, Brylan, talk to me about the acting and characters.
Yeah, when it comes to the acting characters, I think it's just fair to start off with John Goodman. He's always been one of my favorite actors in any movies, and I like that he gets cast in a role that's kind of out of his element compared to other roles he's played, where he actually has to do some physicality. The dude has to run and stuff, and you know what, John Goodman, props to you for getting a little bit healthier in your older age, and also being able to hustle. I appreciate that. Old chunky dudes can still run. Definitely prove that to everybody. But I think what's awesome about John Goodman, he can turn it on when he's loud and imposing, but also he can also be very nuanced and subtle with his acting as well, which I think he does a lot in this movie. And I think it actually helps elevate the movie to higher levels because of that, because he has moments where he has to be straight up the bad guy in this movie. And but we know that by the end, I mean, his whole overall purpose, even though he's having to sacrifice people, he's probably even murdered people to get to this point, but it's all for this one moment that leads to significant change for the rebellion against the aliens.
Yeah, I mean, I can't give him as much props. Like, I want to give him even more props for his physicality, because I think the last time that I've seen him in such a prominent role, and maybe I could be forgetting the film in between, was 10 Cloverfield Lane. And it felt like he couldn't move in that actual film at all. Now, I understand they were underground. Yeah. I kind of get that.
Confined space.
But even in the confined space, I think he was like kind of dancing, and there was like a couple of bops that he did at the jukebox there. And I was like, oh, that's kind of fun. But like seeing him out and about and actually kind of flexing. Oh, actually, maybe it was, what was that movie with Charlize Theron? And she was a agent.
Atomic Blonde.
Atomic Blonde. So he was in that, but not really. So I really liked the actual physicality that he placed in it. I was super pumped to kind of learn a bit more and kind of delve into his character a little bit more. So he was really nice to be on scene, especially just being an antagonist for the majority of for the time. So definitely kudos to you, Mr. Goodman.
Yeah. I also think it's neat that there's some actors like I've never seen before in other films here. One is Ashton Sanders, who played Gabriel in the movie. He plays this character that's kind of like in between. He's not really part of the Resistance. He's not a collaborator with the aliens. He's kind of just trying to survive, and his ultimate goal is get the fuck out up until a certain point. Mm-hmm. And I felt like his acting, it was kind of erratic. There were points where I actually looked up to see whether or not he was a British actor, because I could hear his accent change, but he's actually from California, so I was wondering if he was trying to affect a Midwestern accent and just was dropping it from time to time. But I thought there were some really cool points where he showed some good raw emotion, especially when he was with his brother Rafe as well.
I'm kind of nervous about Ashton Saunders here, because it feels as though he's being, and it's not fair because he hasn't been in a lot of movies, but the movies that we have seen him in, it feels like he's definitely being kind of typecasted into this certain demographic. And the only other two movies that I know that I've seen him in was Equalizer 2 and Moonlight. And so when I look at these three characters, he was he the kid that he was the kid that Denzel mentored. Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, exactly. But he plays literally like I know the plots are entirely different, but he plays a very, very similar character, but a bit more, I guess not as talkative, like not as open. It felt like he had a bit more muted or a more, I guess, complex sort of performance in Captive State. And so I guess I'm just kind of nervous that he's kind of getting stuck in this role to be like the skinny, kind of weird, wily, kind of gangster kid, but not really. He plays that up pretty well, and I really hope he doesn't just get stuck in just doing those roles all the time. So I think that was kind of a bummer because I wasn't entirely sure what he was doing sometimes and what actions and what directions that was kind of given to him. And at one point, and I thought it was super weird, at one point he just disappears from the film entirely. And I'm like, wait, what? What's going on? So I'm not sure exactly what they were, like, how they were actually kind of using him, especially if he's supposed to be like the centerpiece when we get that great sort of shot from a phone video at the end and that huge reveal. And so if he's supposed to be sort of like our main character, I guess I just kind of wanted a bit more from him throughout the entire movie.
Yeah, and I think there are some plot points which we'll get into later that I think kind of undermine his character a little bit too.
Yeah, Mocha, you gonna say something?
No, I was just going to say that, that section where he was disappeared from the movie was before that, like, the whole secret plan went into motion, and he was just kind of kept out of it for the entire time, and I think that was to give us a focus, like a laser focus on what was meant to be a really intense, long scene. But I think it was, like, an issue that this movie had overall, I think, with pacing, and I feel like it was cool when I realized, they're giving this character up timeout because we're going to get a different point of view. But I don't think they really capitalized on their ability to do that while telling a story that really had the potential to be much more spread out, given the setting and what was going on. Yeah,
I don't think when he disappeared that had anything to do with him as a character. He can't kind of control that, right? It's everything else. It's
right.
The show. It's the showrunners and the people who created this movie that they just didn't explain enough for me to be like, what's happening here? Because it just didn't really make a lot of sense. And I know we'll talk a little bit about that later on in the actual sort of plot section.
Yeah. Yeah. Another actor I thought was actually really great, even though we get some moments with him, but he's definitely not the central character, but as Jonathan Majors as Rafe. I thought it was just really cool. Like, they set him up as this living legend of the Resistance after this battle at Wicker Park. But I love that when we find out he's alive and everything, that he's not that living legend in a classical sense where he's like, yes, I will lead the rebellion to a greater cause and everything. They play around with his character. I mean, we can see that he's visibly scared a lot of the times, that he knows that every time he goes outside or anything, he's putting his life at risk. And it was good to see that he has kind of like that paranoia. He's always looking behind his shoulder and everything. And I think that also speaks volumes with like people that are in underserved areas, just having to look over the shoulder because of authority figures and everything. And I think that even when it gets to a point where he's tortured, that it's good to see that he's not like stoic and taking it quote unquote like a man. He's actually in pain and everything. So I thought he did a fantastic job with the character he portrayed.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. I was really bummed because I felt like this was one of the more interesting characters that they gave him some time to shine, and I was like, oh, okay, like, this is the kind of movie that we're kind of getting into. I definitely felt they tipped their hat a bit too much of plastering his face all over the place and saying how he's dead. Clearly we know he's not dead. Like, it was obvious. It's like, all right, I've seen this guy's face like 10 times before we even see his brothers once. We know he's going to show up. It's just a matter of when he shows up, right? And then the weird being on the bus, everything's like super dark and he has a hat on. I'm like, that's clearly him. You might as well just show me that's him in the first 10 minutes of this film. What are you doing? But I liked his character a lot. I kind of wanted him a bit more in this actual film. I kind of wish that not necessarily the roles were switched, but I think both of these brothers should have been highlighted a bit more. Less on John Goodman's character, less on the other side characters, because there's a lot that was introduced at a moment and then all disappear. And so I think those things need to be kind of tuned down. Also, Machine Gun Kelly being in this movie, why? But it was like, I like what he was doing, and I think he was playing much like you were talking about, like a tortured soul. But he still has to be there for everybody else. He understands, and he's willing to risk his life to do everything that he needs to do. But it's tough because now you have a family member on there, and that complicates a couple things. So I really like some of the scenes that we were kind of getting from him. Again, I'm going to say it a lot, but the script did not really help him at all.
No. So two things about what you just said. One, Machine Gun Kelly is great, and I want him in every single movie if possible. And two, I think that you said, Warren, earlier, I really wanted more out of X, and I feel like I wanted more is my feeling towards almost everything about this movie. This movie was an hour and 49 minutes long, and we know that a specific scene was 40 minutes, which means that there was really only an hour and 9 minutes of this movie, which isn't a lot, and they tried to do a lot. And I really feel like this movie, the tone wasn't good enough to have it be a standalone franchise. I wish this movie was like a 4-part miniseries on like HBO or something like that. I think they could have done a lot if they just expanded on every single aspect, like character in this movie, while still retaining like the vibe and the feel and the intensity of that 40 minutes. Like that 40-minute scene could have been its own episode. It could have been episode 3, or episode 2 or whatever. Like, and so in the previous episodes, kind of building up who these characters are and why we should really care about them. But I really feel like this movie, we needed more out of it, and I don't think an actual feature-length film was the right setting for it.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Another actor I just wanted to mention is Vera Farmiga. We get just a few scenes with her. I do like her how her character is set up. It's not the first time I think I've seen a prostitute as the leader of a underground revolution or insurgency, but I always like that trope. And I think that she has some neat scenes with John Goodman that definitely speak more with how they are looking at each other and more of their behavior towards one another rather than the words they're saying. But I think that maybe we should have had some scenes more to kind of establish like that is an actual working brothel or anything, or just see some more of her clientele that would actually walk through her doors.
Yeah. I was very confused for a long time in this film exactly what was the purpose of her character. I guess it was on purpose because they were trying to keep it in the dark and kind of keep it close to the huge reveal. I get that. I guess it's fine. It just didn't make any sense to me when they did reveal it. I'm like, you could have told us some of this stuff before. I mean, it feels like for me when I was looking and seeing her character, I'm like, did I miss a part of the movie? And I legit thought I came in at the wrong time and I came in late because they were just dropping a lot of things and characters and he was going through and talking softly and I was like, is John Goodman a good guy or a bad guy? Like, there was just not enough character development, again, we were talking about Mocha, that I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to kind of pull things and grasp things out of the air. I'm like, what's supposed to be her character? Is she supposed to be a bad person because she's a prostitute all of a sudden? And then we find out she's a kindergarten teacher, and I'm like, what? How did that happen? So, again, I'm going to say it a lot. I thought she was really wasted, but I'm not sure.
Well, I feel like, and this is actually an issue I have with the story of the movie, but I feel like they were definitely intending to try to make her and John Goodman's relationship mysterious. The fact that she is number one or whatever they called her, like the leader of the rebellion, was supposed to be a twist at the end of the movie. But I don't think at any point was it like well hidden that she was a good guy working for the rebellion.
Yeah, that was in the insurgency some way.
Yeah, I felt like that was just it, like right off the bat. And, they tried to hide John Goodman's motives with going to see her, and I actually think the twist itself was kind of nice, but I don't think it was, because it was such a we had such a limited amount of time with every character. It was like, okay, obviously she has to be part of the insurgency, and obviously John Goodman has to be involved with them, because otherwise we wouldn't be seeing all this stuff, But yeah, I don't know. Is that when you got to the movie? Like when John Goodman was first interacting with her character? That's like 20 minutes.
No, I got to the movie when the beginning, when the family was going through, and
when Racing Gabriel's dad and mom were trying to drive him out.
Which doesn't make any sense why Racing Gabriel didn't die in that car blast, but whatever. So,
well, he covered his head.
It makes sense because...
What? You shut your mouth.
They were in the back of the seat.
Oh, okay.
In the back of the car.
Oh, okay. I'm not gonna...
Wait.
We're not here. We are not gonna go and poke holes through this.
They came back to this. They came back to this later on to show us that the aliens have a hard time with back seats, because that one guy, the alien, hid in the back seat for like 20 minutes while waiting for his friends to come save them.
I was gonna bring this up too later on. I'm like, okay, hold up. Is back seats, or why didn't Rafe actually die in that car? Like, well, you can tell me you can just fight them with your hands and pull off their mask? What?
It's alien technology. Can't explain it, just like in Captain Marvel.
The humans call it a couch. We do not understand its mystery.
So bad. Brylan, go ahead.
Speaking of the aliens, I did want to mention a little bit about the alien design and their look and everything. I liked it. I didn't love it. The spiky version of the aliens were kind of neat with how they could just morph into weapons. But as you said, like, there might be some logic issues with how they could attack people, especially if they get in the backseat of cars. But I found that their weapons that just dusted people into a red mist was fascinating. I wasn't scared or anything when I saw it happen. It was just like a nice little bit of shock where it's like, wow, that person doesn't exist anymore. Like, they're totally gone. You don't see them anymore. And I thought it was a very well done, I don't know if it was a practical effect or CG or anything, but it was a really neat effect that kind of actually added to the desperation of the movie that we felt throughout it.
I don't want to make it seem like I'm just refuting all your points, Brylan. So I definitely don't seem like I'm shitting on your thoughts. I thought it was kind of bummed, though, that you either show me the alien or you don't. Don't give me this... show me, but it's too dark to actually make out what's supposed to look like in between. Because what am I supposed to do with this? And there are so many kind of things that I'll talk a little bit about the lighting, but the lighting was not their friend in this movie. But there's so many different times in which I'm like, am I supposed to be able to discern what this alien looks like? Or is it like putting my own imagination into this, and maybe they rip off a mask or something? Like, and that's when one of the characters ripped off his mask. I was just kind of confused as to why they even showed it in the first place. Because maybe we didn't need to see what the alien looked like at all. We didn't know what any of the stuff underground looked like. We didn't know what any of the hunters, like, truthfully, like, we saw them what they looked like later on when they were kind of invading the bus and stuff, but that just didn't make too much sense to me. And if it is, we're talking about infantry, gunmen, we're talking about the different ranks in kind of military, that's fine. Some of that stuff just didn't make a lot of sense to me, and I'm like, why would they make that choice? Especially, it was like pretty full center that we could actually see sort of what the alien looks like. I thought that was kind of did themselves a bit of a disservice.
Well, at the beginning, they definitely established that the aliens can easily turn off the power grid of the world. And so they were able to, I mean, if it's going to be in darkness, I mean, that's why, is they know that power is a necessity, and they established this thing, like the governments wanted to actually start clamoring for an armistice to get the lights turned back on, literally, among other things. And so I thought it was a neat little like alien trick that they used throughout the thing. Is like, before they come and get you, they're going to put you in darkness so you can't see them.
I don't mind the overall darkness of the movie, but I feel the exact same way that Warren does, at least about the notion of, like, give me all of it or give me nothing. You know, like, it's pretty standard in terms of, you know, film creation when you have sci-fi elements or horror elements that are supposed to invoke fear in the audience, that you do one of two things. You either make them super mysterious and never let you really see what the villain or bad entity is, so that way the audience's imagination immediately fills in the worst possible thing they can imagine on an individual basis, or you show us exactly what it is, but you make the experience of interacting with them so intense and so like horrible that it becomes scary in and of itself. This is like something like you'd see in like John Carpenter's The Thing, where you always see the aliens and monsters, but it's horrifying to deal with them. And in this movie, I feel like they didn't do either. You know, they tried to keep things super, like, dark and misshapen, and you could definitely see details of the urchin aliens, but never really saw them clearly enough. The same thing with the hunters. You saw them really clearly, but again, always in the dark. And I feel like, you know, either you choose to go fully mysterious or not. But they gave us just enough where they weren't really alluring, but not enough to make us invested in how scary it was to interact with them. At least I felt that way.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with you.
I love the design of the ship, though.
That was cool.
Their spaceship was really cool.
Yeah.
I liked how, I mean, I don't know if it's natural is the best word for it, but it just felt like it belonged in that world, and it kind of just felt like it was something expected to see if an alien invasion happened. It was just every once in a while you'll see these ships just burst off into the atmosphere, taking prisoners away, and it felt like just, yeah, this is kind of like establishing, like, think of like if aliens arrived and started just oppressing everybody and enslaving the race, that, yeah, you would see like just constant ships just flying off, taking prisoners or slaves to do whatever they want.
And also the look and movement of it was really cool because, you know, all too often sci-fi writers will say, okay, what are aliens? Well, the aliens are the most advanced version of what we are. And usually their technology reflects this. It is at least representative of different things that you would have seen in the human world. And here it seemed like something completely different. Like the spaceship looked almost like it was fully organic. It didn't look like something that could float and fly, and it didn't have any propulsion, but it moved in this way that no like airborne ship or even sea ship that, you know, humans create moves. And I thought it gave a really eerie feeling to all those quiet moments looking over the lake when you just see it taking the prisoners away.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, I only had a couple other thoughts to add for the characters. I really enjoyed that sequence. What we were talking about, that 40-minute sequence that felt like it was an Ocean's 11 with all the humor removed, but it was a really nice kind of heist and setup, especially how everything was happening at a particular kind of time and different beats, and you can see that each and every one of the characters had to make that choice to like sacrifice and give up their lives. So I thought that was a really, really cool, really powerful sequence. To the point where that's another reason why I wanted to kind of give a shout out to the cinematographer and also probably the editor. I loved that sequence because there was so much going on at one point, and it was crazy. A lot of different things had to happen. I think the dog barking also kind of bothered me in a good way, because I was like, oh, that'll be scary. That's annoying that you just working and all of a sudden this random dog barks and that's like your cue to give up your life. Like, oh shit. And then we see everything slow down all to the point where in that elevator they're just standing there, and it's just something about like Rafe's jacket in the bright red that's almost kind of off center and all the other characters kind of around him. I thought that was marvelous. I was really on board with this movie. So I thought that was actually kind of pretty cool. So I'm really glad that they gave us some of these characters. I'm not saying that we needed to learn all of it about it, but we actually didn't even see from a lot of these characters anymore. Like, were they just kind of recruited randomly? Like, some of them were too young. Clearly, they weren't a part of the bigger resistance. And so it felt like they were just... I guess once that happened, I sat there and said, okay, well, it seems like all these people are going to die except Rafe. And that's exactly what happened in the movie. I was like, oh, come on, that sucks. Like, I was hoping for like a different sort of outcome to see whoever has the most amount of lines is going to stay alive. So I didn't really like the fact that they kind of threw away their side characters. I kind of wanted a bit more from those impact moments, especially because they all, or half of them, committed suicide. I mean, come on. Like, that emotional beat is completely washed away with the fact that it's a voiceover from John Goodman, and all we see is like some reaction shots from other people, and we actually see like the medical student, right? He's actually in the actual bathtub because he slit his wrist, and I'm like, that entire emotional sort of element that was attached to those characters is completely thrown away, and that was really sad because it felt like it just was kind of rushed, and we didn't kind of care too much about it.
I mean, this is what I mean.
I want to contradict that, but I want to get into the story and plot part for that.
Okay.
Fine. Before we go on, I just want to say that, like, this is what I mean by saying that this movie needed more on both ends, because that scene was so cool. The aesthetics of the group themselves, like, you know, that shot where they're in the elevator and you see all of them lined up, they're all such different and unique looking people, and they all just seem fascinating, and I wish we could have gotten to know them even just a little bit. You know, these are all a group of people, part of a terrorist network, that are in a very small slum. Like, we could have seen some interactions there without going in like super overboard with like in-depth character analysis.
Sure. Yeah, Mocha, what else you got for acting and characters?
You know, I feel like ultimately my feeling with the acting is that the acting was fine. It's just there wasn't really much of it. You know, like most of the characters, their whole role was to just kind of look there and look somber and overall defeated. Aside from Rafe, who was the only character who really seemed to get any emotional outbursts. Him and John Goodman. But I thought the acting was just fine. But there wasn't much of it.
Okay. So talking about acting and characters, let's go over the story and plot, because it feels like we've been waiting to talk about this more so than the acting and characters. I'll toss it over to Brylan. I'll let you.
So I'll start with what you just mentioned. That 40 minutes of watching the insurgent cell go through the motions of communicating with one another, telling each other it's time to execute the plan, and executing the plan is brilliant. It's I love how they just set up that it's not about like this one big message or one big like golden football that has to get to the magical place to actually make everything happen. It's all sorts of many different pieces that have to come together in these very intricate parts to actually make this plan pull off. And it's really neat that how do you actually communicate with one another in a world that has eyes on you no matter what? Like, especially with these tracker bugs that they've implanted into the human populace, which are like very like kind of body horrorish on their own in their own rights. Like, there's one scene where we see that lady in the park, and the tracker bug actually is like pulling at her neck and stuff, just because the flying robots are just like, oh, you must have done some bad, come with us. It's like tugging at her in her neck, and that's like, ooh, that's very horrifying and stuff when you see that. But I thought that this insurgency plan was brilliant up for the most part, where we meet all these different characters in a very breakneck pace. That we have this car mechanic, we have this med student that's found a way to take those trackers out. We have Rafe in there. We have this this guy that runs this nightclub. We have like all these different pieces that are coming together. We have this priest that makes everything happen, and the priest's wife somehow has been able to smuggle one of the alien bombs. That's a cloaking device as well. And to just add all these parts together and then have them run into some moments that are kind of harrowing, like especially when they get to Soldier Field and Rafe is waiting at the exit point where they think that the guy that they need to put the bomb on, because he's going to be meeting with the what do they call him, the legislature. Nice name for them. that he needs to put the bomb on there, that he's actually going through a different gateway, so he's got to have to haul ass to the other side of Soldier Field to actually carry on the mission. It's all fantastic. I would say just one little thing that I thought needed to kind of be expressed better was the impact of the insurgency's bombing. We see like a big ball of fire go through the tunnels at Soldier Field, but we don't see like who was killed or what was killed. What was the fatality impact of that? Did it actually... we know it didn't really hurt the aliens' base in the center of Chicago, but we know that it's actually pissed them off a lot for some reason. So would kind of been better to see like a group of those aliens get killed rather than, or seeing a whole section of Soldier Field just erupt would have been, I think, more shocking visual, and it would also kind of play in more into the end of the movie where we see John Goodman go down into the caves of the aliens, and his whole body is covered in bombs, which I thought was a magnificent visual as well. Just seeing him go down into that tunnel, and you start to slowly see the bombs actually show themselves around him. But then we also see at the end credits, like we see like base destroyed, and starts happening around the country and everything. So I think that was I thought that was a brilliant piece of movie making, was that 40 Minutes of Insurgency. I just wish that the payoff was just a little bit more in your face to show us like, oh wow, they actually did some damage finally.
Yeah, I like the setup of that sequence too. I know I talked about cutting this out, but it was interesting because I had no idea what they were doing. She was hiding some sort of weird thing that we couldn't really see, but it's a cloaking, it's a bomb. She was hiding it somewhere, I think, in the toilet, right? In the top of the toilet. Yeah. And so I'm like, what's happening? There's like a lot of mystery, and the guy was able to kind of figure out how to arm it because he used to be the Army lieutenant, I think. So he
was in the Marine Corps.
Marine Corps, okay. And so I like some of that information on there, but again, I can't agree with you more. That bomb should have killed a lot of civilians. Unfortunately, but it definitely should have, especially because to see how large that one bomb, right? Because he stuck it on the carrier, right? And that's what they determined who was going to be. So that should have blown up a lot more, but I felt like they rushed I felt the movie at that sequence felt like they wanted to focus on how the characters were going to escape and less on the impact. And make it even, that's okay, but the escape wasn't that good, especially from what you already kind of set up. So I think that was kind of a bit of a bummer. I did have a clarifying question for you guys talking about the story and plot. What was everybody, during the raid when John Goodman goes in, kind of raids everybody's sort of like apartments and stuff like that.
And Pilsen, yeah.
Yeah, and Pilsen. So what do you guys think the people were all throwing away out of their windows and stuff in Pilsen?
Contraband. Like anything that the aliens have established is a no-no, whether it's like technology or weed or drugs. I mean, it would have been... I think it was just very like reminiscent of like, if the police raided I don't know what to call it, but a ghetto house, or like a very big,
house maybe,
a big
house?
crack house or a ghetto apartment that's like a super high rise or something.
A ghetto domicile.
It's a ghetto house.
It's like 5050. That one
really
person runs
great
around, and then you just like toss that shit.
I love that. I love that Brylan has watched The Wire, and it sounds like he bases everything off of
I haven't watched The Wire. I just can't get my words out tonight. Thank you, beer. I think it wasn't anything specific. I think it was just contraband that they were throwing out the windows.
Got it. Okay. I felt like I was also kind of missing something, like I guess we didn't necessarily know what was on the list itself, but also the dumb decision for Gabriel to somehow, why is he there? And he also has, I'm not going to talk about...
This is home.
Yeah, but why is he there? He's clearly being on the run. Brylan, continue to talk about plot and story.
All right. Well, you mentioned earlier that you're kind of like bummed out by like, oh, they're killing these people all off, and we didn't really get an emotional connection with them. I think that's kind of the point. I think they're trying to show like, hey, people are going to die a lot when you actually face up against an oppressive force like this, but is it worth it? Is the whole big answer. And at the end, they definitely say, yes, it's worth keep on fighting no matter who you lose in this. Even if people that have been on your side the whole time have had to actually hold you at arm's distance. So I think it was really neat about Mulligan that he was keeping close tabs on Rafe and Gabriel, especially Rafe, because they have been known to actually either do terrorist acts or be associated with terrorists. But also, it was twofold. We find out at the end that like this, he was the partner of their dad, and he's essentially like a godfather or an uncle to Rafe and Gabriel. And so I think it actually validates a lot of Gabriel's emotions and also some of his inconsistencies, that how he feels towards Mulligan, that he's very resentful and hateful towards him because he was his dad's partner as well. But I think it also is the brilliant part of like John Goodman and like what happens with Mulligan is that he's actually playing both sides of this conflict, that he has to actually act as the captain of this special agency, but also he's want to make sure that these boys grow up to actually fight for the right thing, which I thought was really cool, even if it means that their life has to be sacrificed. And I think that's very telling with Vera Farmiga's character, that when they actually raid the brothel, that she gets immediately just shot in the head and everything. It's not very melodramatic or anything. It's just people walk in, shoot her in the head, that's it. And that last scene with John Goodman and Vera Farmiga before that happens, it's definitely telling, where she hands him the cell phone. It's like, in this box is what you need. And it's just played really well, but it's also very, very subtle how they do it, that it actually is telling that, like, yeah, she's not going to see this through the end, and he knows that, and that's breaking his heart at the same time. Beware the Greeks bearing gifts.
Yeah.
I liked how they were approaching current events in a very subtle fashion, and it made you think more about current events and what could be the possibilities if something was taken to the extreme or got out of hand. That it's not like kind of Captain Marvel, where it was kind of heartfelt with the refugees and very definitely passionate towards like those of underserved lifestyles, that they need compassion and they need help to get to where they need to be. This is more of like, if a government became an authoritarian government and started oppressing its people, even though there's peace and no fighting and no crime or anything, but there's no freedom and everything, and there's no way they can have agency, because they all have these probes that are stuck in their necks, telling them every single thing they do. That it's almost a hopeless cause. I think that the opening scene where we see Rafe and Gabriel's dad trying to drive him out and everything, that he shows like he's a cop and trying to get past that barrier, and even the cops won't let him through. When their parents get killed, it's a very shocking moment that basically tells you like, oh, this is kind of hopeless stakes, that their technology is so superior and so alien to us that humans, how do they stand a chance to actually take on this force that's actually taken over their world and is going to strip mine it for all its resources and everything. Go ahead.
Yeah, now going on that, the government was not shown in any positive light in this movie at all.
Oh no, they rush right ahead to say, "Hey, we give up."
Yeah, I was like, immediately I was like, "Oh, okay, the army's in it," and then we do a little small flash time forward. I was like, "Oh, the government just doesn't give a shit," and then they are automatically like the government is oppressing its own people for this thing, and I'm like, "Oh shit!" Like, you're telling us to revolt right now. Like, the message that you're sending in this movie is a little clear of like, man, the government does not give a shit about its people. That's at least is what I was like, oh fuck, this movie is only 15 minutes in and y'all are hitting me some heavy. Y'all throwing haymakers already. Like, oh, I don't know how I feel about this, but I'm curious to see, how other people who watch the film are looking at some of the messages that are not subtle at all. It's pretty blatant, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Well, you get this a lot with movies that have any sort of rebellion aspect to it, because with any form of rebellion, there's two views. One is the freedom fighters, and the other is the terrorists. And one side is going to view the other them in that way in every single conflict. And so with movies like this, you always have a very direct slant to tell the audience which one of those sides they should be on. With Star Wars, you're always told that the Empire is an oppressive, tyrannical regime, and therefore they're freedom fighters. And with movies like this, you're also told that they're freedom fighters, but at the very least you can see through the way the government and everybody around the rebels reacts that they're viewed as just straight up terrorists. So I feel like it's a rare movie that finally walks the line between those two areas and makes you question what they are on the other side. And honestly, even just thinking about it right now, none come to my head that in terms of cinema that have executed that well.
Yeah, and that's one thing I'd really appreciate about this movie. It's kind of unique in its storytelling, that those things where other movies would take some time to make you feel about a certain character or anything, no, they just say death is death, and it just keeps on moving on, because I feel like the way this movie is structured is usually the way I would actually say a movie is kind of broken. I'd say they didn't really hit it out of the park or anything, but a lot of times I don't like exposition dumps, but I kind of liked how they did it here, because I felt like if y'all ever seen any of those videos by Simon Sinek, he's like a motivational speaker or anything. He has this thing about the circle of how businesses create products and stuff, and how most businesses go one way, and then other businesses that are very unique and everything, they go another way. That's how I felt about the trajectory of the story was definitely very breakneck and face forward. I mean, there's no reverse in time or anything, no flashbacks in this movie. It is basically we're starting here and ending here. But also felt like the plot structure was actually reversed. Whereas we're showing you the effects and the actions first. At the very end, we're going to tell you why. And I thought that instead of we do get a bit of an exposition dump with the debriefing with the aliens at the end, which is we found all these tapes at Vera Farmiga's house, and the commissioner's voice is on them, and that's why he gets sent up to space and everything. But it's also John Goodman's way into actually getting access to the aliens too. But then at the very end, that movie that is played for Gabriel is why is this important? Why should you fight and everything? It's not instructions on how to actually win the war or anything. It's just purely just motivation. Why we fight is this imagery of families together, being happy. It's before he's born. His mom's pregnant with him. They're at a party celebrating that Gabriel's coming and everything. I guess, I don't know if it was a gender reveal party or anything, but it was really cool to see. You see a young Rafe there. You see Vera Farmiga, that John Goodman, it looks like it's his first time meeting her, and that sometime eventually they fall in love at one point. But also, John Goodman has a speech is like, you got a choice of being a teacher or a cop, and whichever way you go, hopefully you do it for the right reasons. And I thought that message was actually really beautiful for this movie that's all full of darkness and everything. To end on that, I thought was really cool.
I guess my only issue with that is it felt too pointed to Gabriel's character. Yeah, I just wish that message was a bit more universal. I felt like it was a bit too pointed to Gabriel, and he also destroyed it, so then nobody else can see that footage. And that should have been something that been broadcasted everywhere, right? This is why we fight. I
mean, I wouldn't care. I wouldn't give a shit if I was living a shitty life in a ghetto and someone else was like, "Hey, I used to have a good life back in the day."
But that's the thing,
that was
right?
to motivate him to follow on, to carry the torch that John Goodman and the rest of his family and friends had been managing that entire time.
Yeah, but that's why I think it should have been changed to be a bit more of a universal, like not just pointed to Gabriel. It should have been like more information. I can care less. I like the fact that it was not instructions, right? It's just purely more motivation. But him destroying that was okay. What now? Like, are you gonna be the new the new kind of leader of this kind of revolution? Like, what are you gonna do to kind of motivate these other people? I just felt like it kind of felt a little bit flat to me. I thought it was a great reveal to see that everybody had a part to play, but we just didn't get enough from his character to see how it kind of that impact again, to see exactly what he's going to be doing. But I don't know, maybe that's just something for me. Yeah.
I completely get that. I completely get that feeling, that point of view. To me, the entirety of that scene was meant to show that not only did it kind of click in his head that people had been sacrificing and hiding and working hard to sort of lead this charge on their own, but it showed the moment for him that he committed to living that kind of life too, because he saw this thing that should have been something that for a lesser person would have caused an immediate emotional attachment, made them want to slip up and do something stupid like hide the chip, which we saw in the beginning of the movie. You can't take data away without them catching you. And he made the immediate decision to say, okay, this needs to go, because he now has the same sort of will and mindset that the same people that came before him did, which was being willing to sacrifice your memories of the things that you love for the world that you long for in order to get the job done.
Yeah, I mean, we ultimately see like Gabriel's only motivation up to when he confronts John Goodman at the raid is that he wants to get out. But then once he sees the boat is burned, once he finds out Rafe has been captured, he finds Machine Gun Kelly's gun and he confronts John Goodman because that's the only direct person that he sees that is like, this is someone I can actually get to that's actually against me. And once he actually approaches him with the gun, then that's like the sign that John Goodman sees, like, okay, Gabriel's ready.
I don't think I got that, but I think that's a bit of a stretch, but all right.
I don't think it is.
What else you got, Bradley?
I would also say I love an alien invasion movie where the alien tech or the future tech, we get to see it in action and everything, but I like that the oppressed populace has to struggle to get access to it. So that just shows you, I mean, very smart invasion by the aliens that, yeah, they have all this technology and everything, but they're definitely going to limit access of things to their populace to keep them suppressed and also compliant to what they want to do as well. But one thing that did really bother me is I think this is the biggest problem with the movie is when Gabriel ever uses the neck harness thing, he uses it usually the wrong time. And it's weird. Like, he takes it off and he actually kind of just like rats out his brother and everything while talking to his girlfriend. And then when he's randomly walking down the street, it's like, oh, let me put the neck harness on so nobody can find me because I'm going to go run into somewhere that's a little shady. And then the only other time he uses the neck harness is kind of hide himself from those. I guess this is a close-up of those hovering, like, bird-like robots. We finally get to see them up close. Were the ones that surrounded the parking lot pod that he was in where they have like sucker faces and stuff like that. That I don't know what they would have done to him with those sucker faces, but he just had to like huddle down and just hang in there until something actually pulled him away.
Yeah. I sat there. The first thing I thought was, why would you ever take that neck harness off?
Yeah.
Just leave it on for the rest of the movie.
Stay off
what
the grid,
doing?
get out.
Yeah. And then I thought, why aren't more people using these neck harnesses? Like, everybody should be using these things. I know it looks weird, but like, what's going on? That was
a roused a suspicion.
Yeah, for sure. But that was like the biggest thing to be like, what are you doing? Like, why was this even introduced? Like, maybe there was a battery issue. Like, maybe there could have been something. There could have been a limit, but we get the fact that there's a neck harness. It looks weird, but there was no downside to continue to wear it. So
what I kind of got from it was the fact that because there was so much visual surveillance as well, and there were spies throughout the ghetto, that if you were walking around wearing that neck harness, you would have gotten ratted out no matter what. But the whole goal of it was when you needed to make sure you were off the grid for an executable action, you snapped it on, you went dark, you did what you had to do, and then you took it off again, so you were back in the crowd, so to speak.
Yeah, that was weird. Kind of the on and off. I was like, oh, this is bad.
Yeah,
also,
I just felt like
he definitely used it poorly.
I felt like when Gabriel used it was at like the most opportune times. But yeah, its purpose is definitely obvious.
I mean, the only other thing I wanted to add to this is that it felt like they spent a bit too much time of just characters running. There's just a lot of running in this movie, especially from Gabriel's character. And I was just like, why are we just following, trying to chase? You're chasing a guy in a car, and he's running on foot. There's so many issues wrong with this actual sequence. I'm not going to believe it at all. But
Chicago's a big city.
Yeah, clearly, I guess. Mocha, what do you got for a plot and story?
For the plot and story, I mean, this movie, I don't think this movie was very long, but it felt long. And not in a way that I think really detracted it, because like I mentioned earlier, I wish this movie had more going on in it. But I just feel like as well executed as that bombing run scene was, the fact that it was such a long period of time without much, or really if any at all, dialogue, it just kind of made me feel the time that was taking place. And I don't know, it was a very odd feeling. I feel like overall they tried their hand at a lot of misdirection, but I think ultimately that kind of failed just because it was kind of the story was so pointed and so kind of direct in what it was trying to tell that there really was only a few ways for it to end, and it seemed kind of obvious in the direction it was going to go. But I don't know. I like the theme of like the older generation trying to inspire the new generation to fight. Like that seemed to be like the running discourse. But like we should have gotten some more of the new generation so that way we could care about what was being left for us. We had what's his name?
Basically on Gabriel's shoulders.
Yeah, which is like I get it. He's the quote unquote like pseudo main character, but like come on, like there needs to be other people. That's all this movie told us was that the rebellion would have failed without having a lot of people who were committed. And the only other character we get is Yorgos, who, as much as I love Machine Gun Kelly, like his character didn't do much. His character was, I honestly think his character could have been completely removed from that entire movie and not changed much at all. And we should have seen more. We should have seen more of these characters that were going to be taking up the torch, that were around Gabriel or even around the other players, you know? Like we had the kid in the Marine base. Yeah, who ran with the quarters. And so, yeah, he's going to be part of it. But, like, he didn't have any dialogue. He just ran and, like, made phone calls. There was so little else really to go off of for what the future that this movie was ultimately leading towards was. I think one thing about this movie that kind of annoyed me, and I get that it was for the sake of having a big dramatic beat at the end, but John Goodman blowing up in the elevator was dumb to me. Like, he blew up in the elevator, and there's nothing that's telling me that would have completely eliminated the structural integrity of the entire facility. Like, at least have him get to the bottom of the elevator, be taken into the main room with the legislators, and then detonate there. You know, like, give us that payoff we've been told this whole time that no one gets to go into the contained zone, and only the commissioner does. And John Goodman finally enacts his plan to sabotage the existing commissioner and become the new commissioner and get to see them. And we had that long moment before he went down the elevator where he was being interrogated. And so we get introduced to the head legislators via their voices and the translated dialogue. But we never get the resolution of actually getting to see him go face to face with them and detonate. Like, I feel like we were owed that at that point in the movie.
Well, I mean, what's interesting is, like, so Rupert Wyatt directed this. He did the first Planet of the Apes, which is also a very, like, brilliant idea but flawed movie as well. And he kind of does the same thing at the end, where you see a person carrying the canister that actually starts the plague that starts wiping out humans but makes apes smarter. We get that in the credits where it shows like cities be collapsing underneath this plague that's just ravaging the world. And I guess he just likes ending his movies this way, because he does the same thing here, where we see that John Goodman's going down the elevator. We don't know if the bomb's actually ignited in the shaft or anything. But it's at the next cut we see is a map, and it shows that Chicago base destroyed. And then it starts to show other cities and the same thing happening. So maybe it's his thing. Maybe it's still like what he wants his calling card to be whenever he makes a movie. I don't know if he did it in Cloverfield. He directed that as well.
I mean, I kind of agree with both parts here. I think I was just kind of tired of this movie, so I didn't care how it ended, and I thought that was a cool beat. So I do agree with you, Mocha, that I think that payoff would have been nice. I'm just a little afraid that they probably didn't have exactly the design of those legislative aliens, and they just wanted to kind of keep it a bit more mysterious, but he could have easily gotten down there and walked. So that would have been cool. Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about that one. I think it kind of ended fine. I thought it was cool just to see the visual element of the bombs kind of activating around John Goodman. I think that was what they wanted to kind of focus on a bit more instead of blowing some shit up. So let's move into our conclusion, kind of the final section. Briley, would you recommend this movie? If so, what's a movie that you probably tell people to watch before checking out Captive State?
Yeah, so I would recommend watching this movie. I mean, this movie is actually my kind of sci-fi. I like these movies that just make you start thinking, but also is able to kind of, as Mocha mentioned earlier, like kind of balance the fine line of like, or do we need to root for these heroes or not? Or how can a oppressed populace actually rise against a definitely overwhelming force? It's always an interesting thing to actually explore. And I think it has also made me a bit of a fan of Rupert Wyatt. Even though I didn't really like Cloverfield that much, I did like Planet of the Apes, and that's like one of my favorite trilogies of the last decade. And I like that he takes these interesting risks and is telling stories that are a little bit different than other filmmakers. I would say like probably a good movie that might complement this to watch it with would probably be District 9, just because I think it's actually the reverse of this movie. So I think it would actually complement it really well.
Okay. Mocha, how about yourself?
You know, I don't want it to seem, based on the words that came out of my mouth earlier, that I didn't like this movie. I actually liked it a lot. I'm still not quite sure if it deserves how much I like it, though. It's moody, it's tense, it delivers on those fronts really well, but it doesn't really ever drive it home to a satisfying finish. Still, I'm satisfied overall with watching it. I don't think this movie deserves anyone's theater ticket money, but when it inevitably shows up on Amazon Prime Video, you should definitely check it out.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, definitely don't spend your money. It is a bit of a original story, so I think you can actually get something away from that. It just really executed really poorly. So I don't know if I can recommend this movie. Definitely check it out if it's like in the background or something free to watch, or if it's streaming, feel free. I just wish that they had a better story and they had a better execution. I guess that means they also have a better director and actors. But it wasn't all terrible. So it is definitely not the worst movie I've seen this year. So there you go. So we have been the Down in Front podcast. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for tuning in. Brylan, where can people find more of your work on the internet?
You can find me passing cryptic pieces of paper to Mocha and other people on the internet at Twitter, at Bryland, Brilund. You can also find me posting many movie and TV reviews on Instagram at I am Bryland. Also will post not only the most fire memes on there, as the kids say.
It slaps, right?
All right.
Mocha, how about yourself? Where can we find you on the internet?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, where I style the hairs of chitinous, spiky urchin-like creatures. Mocha Mike Li. That's Li. Unfortunately, you cannot find me at Mocha Mike. The person who owns that username sacrificed his life in a feudal war, and now I can no longer gain access to it. So until that changes, it's Mocha Mike. You can also find me on Instagram, where I post some photography work from my travels and general kind of pictures, and Medium, where I've written some longer form articles about the movies we talk about here.
Check out more of our work at downinfrontpodcast.com. That's where you'll find video teasers, tons of artwork, our bio, just a lot of good information. That's probably the main place to go. If we're on Facebook, facebook.com/downinfrontpodcast, Twitter @_DAFP. If you like what we do, you want to consider becoming a Patreon, patreon.com/downinfrontpodcast for bonus episodes, early episodes, and some more content. So anything and everything will be helpful. We're actually on Spotify. We're on Google Play. Like literally everywhere you go and find us, that will be amazing. So that will be cool. We also appreciate it. And as we usually do, we'll give you a bit of a send-off to talk about what we're going to be reviewing next week. So, Brylan, what is the amazing movie that we'll be reviewing next week?
We will be reviewing us. That's right. We will be reviewing each other on the next podcast.
That sounds kind of spicy. That sounds exciting. Well, we will say goodbye, so long, and we'll see you next week. Bye!
Yeah, from a business stance, I think this movie ultimately feels like Rupert Wyatt made this.